Welcome to the first of American Halal Consultants free live webinars. I'm Elizabeth Myers, a co-founder and executive vice president of the American Halal Consultants. And we launched AH Consultants last month to help businesses navigate the US halal market. Consultants is the only consulting group in the US that I'm aware of that actually focuses on helping businesses enter, operate, and or expand in the halal space. Uh, I'll give you just a little bit of a business context. The concept of halal, as we're focusing on it here, is less about religion and more about health. The market is expanding rapidly due to consumer demand for products that are environmentally friendly, free of unhealthy ingredients, and compliant with certain ethical standards or principles. For example, cosmetics are beginning to label themselves as halal to highlight that they have no impurities or toxins or animal products in them. Body products are doing the same, things like moisturizers, soaps, and scrubs. Schools and universities are bringing in halal menus and food for their students. There are now alcohol-free hotels and resorts, and they're marketing themselves as halal, and even halal medical tourism has become a thing. And finally, even vegan products are adopting a halal identity. So in short, halal is about health. And as a matter of pure economics, it's profitable for companies to innovate to meet consumer demand. And after 3 years of presenting an annual Halal Expo and Summit USA, we saw that there was a gap in what companies need to do that. And so now American Halal Consultants is here with our roster of impressive, and I really mean impressive, expert founding member consultants. We're here to help. So today's webinar addresses, and this is the first of a series that we have scheduled for the rest of the year, monthly webinars. Today's addresses policy and regulation in the halal space in the US. Now, in general, in the US, regulation would involve safety and consumer protection, transparency, and consumer access to information. The US has a system of government that's known as federalism. So we have both state and federal regulation. Sometimes they overlap, but most of the time they don't. And at the state level, each state can have its own regulatory system. And currently there are only 9 states that have laws that govern the halal industry in various respects. And those are California, Illinois, Maryland, Michigan, Minnesota, New Jersey, New York, Texas, and Virginia. And in each of those states, just as an example of what they regulate, the sale and or marketing of fraudulent halal meat is at least a misdemeanor. So there are not only potentially civil issues, but there could be criminal prosecution when you violate the laws with regard to halal products. So at the federal level, there are 2 principal agencies that regulate the area, or that regulate areas that include halal. The US Department of Agriculture and the Food and Drug Administration. The USDA in general governs the labeling of agricultural food products like meat, poultry, eggs, and some seafood. And the Food and Drug Administration regulates any other kinds of food, such as processed foods. And we are extremely fortunate to have with us today 2 of our founding member consultants with deep expertise in both of these areas and with both of these agencies. So first, we have Dr. Mustafa Ildaktoki. He is a former international marketing specialist, and also he wrote the US Department of Agriculture's halal policy back in the day, and I hope Mustafa is going to tell us a little bit more about that during the course of his remarks. And he is currently a food technologist and international issues analyst. And next we have with us also Quentin Gray. He's a former agriculture counselor for a number of US embassies in various parts of the world, principally in the Middle East. and he's very knowledgeable about the import-export market and is a lead trainer for the Food and Drug Administration for companies that want to import food into the US. And that would obviously cover halal food. So I don't want to talk any more than that. If I think let's start. Shall we start with Dr. Mustafa El Dakdoki? And if you'd like to tell us a little bit more about the regulation that's done by USDA and your experience and expertise with that, and how that affects companies that are either already in the halal space or want to come into it, enter it, and operate into it. Thank you very much. Take it away, Dr. Mustafa.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Mustafa Al Dakdouki. I'm a food technologist and international issue analyst, as Elizabeth just saying. And I did work for FSIS for almost 35 years. And during this time when I worked with FSIS, I did work in a labeling division, and where I found out about the halal issue. It's been abused in around the country. And when I found out that in labeling in USDA, we check every label that's a meat and poultry product and fresh egg. We check each label, and whatever on the label has to be true. Each single plant in the United States has to be inspected daily by USDA government inspector. With that, I found one of the label has halal word on it. And when I asked the person who brought it to be approved about what this means, he doesn't know. And he just say that the guy who's buying the product asked them to put this word halal on the label. So when I explain it to them, what that mean is if you're going to write anything on the label indicating, let's say, my product is the best product in the whole wide world. Yes, you could do that, but you have to prove it that your product went in a competition and when that became the best product in the whole wide world. So if you put any claim on the label, it has to be correct and true. So the guy took this label and asked the manufacturer actually to explain to them, which they doesn't know either. So anyway, the issue went to the Secretary of Agriculture. At that time was Mike Espy. That was early 1990, which they called me and they started talking about the halal. The first things they came up with, well, as a government, we don't involve in religion. I said, but that is deceiving the consumer. California received a batch after that, like maybe a few weeks after that, which halal on them, but wasn't halal. It's just a matter of they just put that word. And some people, the customer in California suing the United States Department of Agriculture, I remember for $20-some million. At that time, Mike Espy called me again. And I told him, that is because actually this is again deceiving the consumer, and this is again is the law. From that day, I wrote the halal policy and became actually USDA policy. Halal, and there is a requirement in the halal policy, any manufacturer has to put word halal on it, has to meet those requirements. This is simply what happened during this concerning halal issue. So that is basically, if I will go for more details, if you have any question, and I will answer in that. But that's how halal policy became officially USDA halal policy. And by the way, we did contact all our consular in Muslim country, and they were happy with that actually, because the more Muslim country get to know about our policy, they will be asking more about buying the product from the United States, because we have policy on halal, and that's different than other country like South America or in Europe, which they doesn't know, which doesn't have this kind of policy or government policy to protect their claim.
So when you talk about the policy itself, what is the actual policy? Because it's not something that you can actually go to the USDA website and look up, is it?
Well, actually, the policy itself, yes, you could. Yes, the policy itself is that you could go just to USDA and say halal policy, it will appear because it's in our book. And the policy actually I have written in our books among our inspectors and in our official policy book.
Okay, and what is it exactly though? If you were to summarize the policy in a nutshell, what should people know that it is? And
Yes,
why is it for the country?
basically when we did the policy, we indicate that anyone any manufacturer want to put halal word on the product has to meet the Muslim requirement. Then they came up with a question, well, how we know it? And we said is, it depends about the customer. So the customer or a country have certain requirement for halal to be halal. So whatever they be indicating, then they will hire a Muslim organization. There is about, at that time, we're about 7 or 8 different organization, Muslim organization, to look at the product, starting from how you slaughter the animal until became a product, and make sure there is no pork in it. I'm just going to give you an example for how we went through with those requirements. Even though that is, they know the manufacturer that if they have to follow the requirement, still there is some mix between, as a Muslim, as halal product has not to be, that pork never can be part or in the product. So with the manufacturing other product with pork in it, with that, our policy indicate when you do 2 batches, when it's pork or a halal product with any other product, the machine has to stop and cleaned and sanitized before you starting making any halal product. So we make sure the product is halal from A to Z. So from the slaughter to ending the process. That's basically, I'm trying to be as short as possible until we get some question and I can go more details.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Mustafa. We will come back to you for some more Q&A, and hopefully those of you who are watching live on Facebook, please, if you have questions, put them in the chat. We have somebody monitoring that and we can answer them later on in the program. Now let me turn to Quentin Gray. I've already given the short version of his very, very impressive bio. And please, Quentin, tell us a few words about your expertise and what you've learned over the years, and how you, as part of American Halal Consultants, can help companies navigate the halal space in the US for purposes of imports and maybe in the future for exports. But take it away,
Yeah.
Quentin.
Okay. Well, first of all, I can almost remember the first day I heard the word halal. I was the agriculture trade officer in Saudi Arabia, and I was at a conference that was taking place that the government had organized. And it was a lot of discussion about, should you stun the animal? Should you do this? Blah, blah, blah. It was so confusing for me. I'm just telling you, it was totally confusing. And so that was my first experience. I'm talking about 20 years ago now, but that was my first real experience with the issue of halal. And since then, I've worked a lot in the Middle East, as you discussed. And so I lived in Saudi Arabia, I lived in the UAE, traveled throughout the region. I became somewhat of a halal expert, at least from an American standard. So I understand how the issue, if you're not involved in it, it's like the person who saw the word halal and said they asked us to put it on the product, so we put it on the product. But what I've learned is that companies, generally speaking, if they want to get their product in the United States or export their product to the United States, or either a company that wants to export its product overseas, they have to deal with the whole issue of halal, especially if they're exporting to the Middle East. And they have to be able to understand what it means and how it impacts. So initially, a lot of the US regulations and structures that were instituted concerning halal in America were all geared to help meet the international demand for halal products. But what has happened over the past 20, 30 years, that demand has increased domestically. So the Muslim population has been increasing. The non-Muslims that are wanting to eat halal foods has been increasing. So now I would say 20, 30 years ago, you wouldn't see the halal guys. You wouldn't see the little halal shops that you see now in the Washington, DC area. So it's increasing. And when I was in Chicago a few years ago, the one of the panelists, I was on in a conference, on a halal conference, and one of the panelists who works at the University of Chicago asked me if I wanted to tour their cafeteria facility at the university. And I said, yes, sure. So one of the points and one of the reasons why he recommended that I tour it is that he wanted me to see the halal station. And so he wanted to see how, and he talked about how the demand for halal food is bigger than just, the Muslim population. It caters to a lot more people. And so that's one of the points I wanted to make, that the issue is getting bigger and bigger in the United States. And if a company is interested in exporting its products to the United States, I am what's called a lead instructor for the Foreign Supply Verification Program. It's a long name, and it's through FDA. And but what it is set standards for companies that are exporting food products to the United States. It does not cover halal. It does not. It covers more the food safety aspect of food that is coming into the United States. And but in terms of a company that wants to know about halal, I want to discuss briefly what factors they would have to consider in the United States. And one of the things is that I guess you were saying that at Mustafa, you were saying that at one point years ago, there were like 7 certifiers, so to speak, who could certify a product halal. That's probably now they're probably about the same number or even less, maybe 5. And but those organizations handle the certification for halal in the United States. And I, by happen, am an advisor on one of those certification bodies, and or I'm on one of their committees, let's put it that way. And so as a person on that committee, I do get the training from the organization, and I'm up to speed as to what the current regulations are. A lot of what they do as a certifying body is that they are certifying product for export. They're putting on their label, certifying halal, but also they're certifying domestic product as well. So that organization, that certification body, generally speaking, most of them started years ago as religious institutions, so to speak, or parts of a religious establishment. And they grew into a certification body by, just a sheer demand for certification of a product. And so, but over time, that has changed into a business, a real business model. So they're the legitimate businesses. And so now, if you are coming into the United States market and you want to export halal products to the United States market, you have to understand how to get in contact with those organizations and how they operate and how to get the product certified. I can talk all day about halal, but I'm just going to keep it at that. And I guess whenever you're ready for questions, I'm ready.
Well, actually, there is, Quentin, a question already on something that you said. One of our other member consultants, Yvonne Maffei, who's watching on Facebook, asked if you could please repeat the name of the standard or the regulation that you referred to for companies to import products into the US.
That is the Foreign Supplier Verification Program. And that program is administered through the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. And anybody, any company or that's exporting food product into the United States, not all, there are certain food products that are handled by USDA, meat, poultry, and I think certain kinds of seafood are handled by USDA in terms of certification. But any other processed food or food product that's exported into the United States has to abide by what's called the Foreign Supplier Verification Program protocol. And that protocol was established through the Food Safety Modernization Act, FSMA, they call it. And FSMA was put into law in 2011. And that was the first major food safety regulation in the United States before or since the Food, Drugs, and Cosmetics Act of 1939, I think. Don't get me wrong, if it's 38, forgive me, but I think it's 39. So it's about 70 years of time for the United States did not have any kind of global, I mean, really massive food safety regulations. And we know what's happened in 70 years. There's so much that's happening, air travel, everything that's going on. So that legislation, or Congress passed the FSMA in 2011. Implementation just started in 2017. So that governs all of the food safety regulations for food that's being imported into the United States. And you need to understand that. And that's what the 2-day course is that I offer. I train exporters and importers on how to fulfill those requirements. And the training has to be sanctioned, so to speak, through the FDA system. It's not as if I just go out and just give a course. It's a structured course, and there's certain material that as a lead instructor that I'm obligated to teach.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, Quentin, because as a regulatory attorney for almost 30 years, I know very well that the context of what you're dealing with now very much depends on regulation that happened beforehand, and the history of, typically regulation is responding to a gap or responding to a change. It's regulation is very reactive, usually, rather than proactive. Just as Dr. Mustafa's story about the labeling of halal, and there wasn't there wasn't anything to deal with it when that person asked for that. So thank you for that that context. Let's see, Yvonne is asking also if you could provide a link to your 2-day training, or actually, I think Yvonne, that's something we're going to be able to offer. Quentin, in conjunction with American Halal Consultants, will be able to offer some kind of that particular training at some point in the future. We're talking about that. So yeah, we'll keep you posted on that. Stay tuned. Yeah. Okay, I don't see any other questions at the moment. We still have plenty of time in this call. We're supposed to go till 1 o'clock. I think that regulation of the halal space is developing. One thing I had a question about, and when we had our launch last month, we had the former mayor of Alexandria, Allison Silberberg, with us, who touched briefly on the kosher market, because the kosher delivery of kosher products and verification of kosher products is probably, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe about a decade or two ahead of the halal, similar developments in halal. And so what do you see as, what can we learn in the halal space from how regulation developed in the kosher space? Just in general, I'm not asking about particulars, but that was certainly developmental. I know on the state side that some states initially copied their halal regulations from what they'd done on the kosher side, a decade or so before. Is there anything like that on the federal side with USDA or FDA?
Okay. I will take that.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Matter of fact, kosher requirement helped us very much when we started writing halal policy, because actually when I started beginning in 1991, when I wrote this policy, we get some objection from other people by saying government does not involve in religion. That was a word. If we have halal by itself, it will die at that moment. But the question was, but we have kosher, and that helped us, since kosher is a religion. So that, and it already was and was USDA FSIS about like what you said, يمكن 10 years or 20 years before halal issue. And matter of fact, people, Muslim people used to buy kosher, the closest thing to halal, which is different. And I mean it different. We have
Yes.
a paper, or I have paper, I wrote a paper about what's the difference between kosher and halal. And we got people from New York, actually, that's where kosher organization station in New York, and they came to visit me to look at halal policy and try to work with us. And we said, how about if we can get one policy, halal and kosher in a label? But we disagreed in that the kosher is not halal. And the same thing they said was halal is not kosher. So we separated from there, which is very true. So with that, that helped. So when we met the Secretary of Agriculture, that when they were saying about government does not involve in religion, was it true? And that's how we could pass halal policy through all our offices. That's basically about kosher. There
So,
is a lot of stories in these things, because actually we have a problem with Israel, because kosher in Israel is different than kosher in the United States. And then we learn a lot from that too, because we have the same thing. Is some country, Muslim country, has different requirements than the other. That's why we learned from the kosher situation, and we came up, we said, okay, whoever country wanna import product from United States, he has to see what his requirement is. And he has to hire the Muslim organization to look for those requirements. And so the requirements are very similar, but some of them is different. And with that, there is each country have their own organization to look for those halal requirements.
Excellent. Did you
yeah,
have something to add,
yeah.
Quentin? All right.
Yep, absolutely. So as you're so right, Mustafa, that from the consumer, I'm thinking mostly from people I've been associated with in the Middle East. They will eat kosher food if halal food is not available, and they're very particular about the differences in the two. And I'll give you one example. I talked about the fact that I went to the University of Chicago cafeteria, their food facility, and they took me to the halal station. They also took me to the kosher station, and the kosher station requires that that a religious person or a Jewish person is actually in the facility at the time the product is prepared. So and whereas the halal product is, you sell the halal product and it's produced, it's cooked or whatever. So there's a difference in there's sometimes seemingly small differences, but they are somewhat major. Now, to answer your question about a parallel between halal and kosher and how kosher seems to be much more advanced. This is a strange thing, but kosher, the Jewish population is relatively small. And in terms of the number of consumers who are eating kosher for religious reasons is very small. So a lot of people eat kosher who are not of the Jewish faith, and they are eating kosher because kosher is healthy food. I think the parallel is going to be the same for halal, because people are going to say, and it's already happening, you know, people in lipstick and cosmetics and things. Women are saying, I don't want to put product on me that's, you know, going to get into my body, going to mess me up, that sort of thing. So they want to have the purest product as possible. So where I see halal going, it's expanding already from just the meat products. And even from that perspective, people say, I want to eat a more cleaner product, a meat that's a good tasting meat that's healthier for me. So halal has the consumer believes halal is a more wholesome product. So they're ready to eat that product, consume that product. And then for the cosmetics, they're saying we want to wear a product that's gonna not make us sick or whatever. So we want that product as well. So I see a parallel from that perspective in terms of regulations that are going to come out of all of this. I think that the government is going to have to be drug into it.
To drag them into it, okay.
I no longer work for the government, so I can say that. The government's going to have to be drug into it. And the reason why it's happening, though, believe me, because I know that because of the industry, I was speaking at a conference at the U.S. Dairy Export Council conference in Chicago in 2019, and they brought me in to talk about the halal, global market for halal. And so the industry is interested in knowing more about halal so that they can, so it can prepare its companies for the export market. And one of the recommendations I gave was every company in the United States that's exporting, especially to the Middle East, needs to have an export plan, or Asia and the Middle East, because Asia is a large Muslim population, Malaysia, Indonesia. They need to have a halal export strategy and plan. They need to have it in advance and the reason why is because everything is always in a state of flux and everything is changing. The regulations that are coming out of Malaysia, the regulations that are coming out of Indonesia or the UAE, they're like being twerked and changed throughout time. And if you're exporting to that market and you're caught not keeping up with what's going on, you can lose market share overnight. So that's one of the reasons why companies have to be ready. They have to understand the issue and they have to be prepared in terms of having policies set up to handle the rapid changes in the halal space.
Yeah, very good point. And actually that brings us to a question that I believe we have also Marwan, he's not on camera, Marwan Ahmed, he's the president of the American Halal Consultants. And he's put a question here that's a great, your answer just segued into it. Is the halal labeling the same for the US market or different, the same for the US market and the export market, or are they different? And I suspect they're going to be different.
You want to answer? I can answer, but go ahead.
No, if you would like to, fine. Listen.
No, I tell you what, you handle the domestic labeling, I'll handle the international one.
Okay. Well, they are very similar. So actually, if I will say that is actually the same thing exactly. Is actually our policy is for export and domestic in every area. Does not make any difference. The only thing is when you have a country, we leave them to select the Muslim organization they are watching for their requirement as halal. Mm-hmm. Domestically, it's each individual can be the ones who is gonna produce a product, who the one can watch for the requirement he believe for halal product. So that is the only difference. But as USDA policy is exactly the same.
Yeah, I agree. But at the same time, it's a little bit more complicated for a product that's exported. When a product, let's use, let's say there's a good certifier in Denver, Colorado. I won't call a name because doesn't matter which certifier I pick because it all applied to all of them. So that certifier, as far as certifying U.S. product that's being exported within the United States, is, the job is pretty straightforward. You've made certain that the animal has been slaughtered based on halal standards, etc. Blah blah blah. You're done, so to speak. But when the product is exported, there's a whole different game. Let's say that same certifier who's certifying product for product that's being exported to the UAE, and then that same product is being exported to Saudi Arabia or Indonesia. The requirements for that certification could be different in each country. And they all could be similar, but slightly different. Okay, I'm just going to give you one example. Let's say if that certifier in Denver is certifying poultry, and a lot of these countries have on their regulation that stunning is not allowed. And stunning is how most modern poultry is handled now. It's not done by one butcher person with a knife. It's done by automation, and stunning is used to relax the animal. And so let's say that a country has a regulation and says stunning is not allowed. Another country may have it, it is allowed. Now, for each one of those countries, they have to actually approve that certifier in Denver. And they have a series of requirements. And they normally will send out a team of people from their country through an organization in their country to the United States, to that operation in Denver. And then they'll charge that operation in Denver for the right. And so this is the process right now. So that means that certifier, domestically speaking, is not as big of a problem. But if you're talking about that certifier certifying meat for export, you have a whole different game going on, so to speak. The labeling requirement that changes depending on okay, to keep it simple, there are labels that are issued by different bodies in some countries. Like in the UAE, you have at least two options or maybe three options of labeling product as halal. Or you can not label at all. Now that ought to blow your mind.
Yeah.
Now, this is the rationale. This is the rationale. In the UAE, they said that we have certified that all meat products coming into our country is halal. We've done it through our documentation, not on the surface, but we know that that product's halal because of we've done this, we've done this. So why do we have to have a label that says halal? So 4 or 5 years ago, they came up with their new regulations. They said you have a choice. Instead of us having 300 or some halal labels on product, which you go in the stores, you'll see that. They said, if you don't want to use our label, one that's issued through the government or through a certain other organization, then don't have a label on at all. So for US companies, that's a non-starter, because a lot of US companies have invested tons of money in their labeling, and labeling is a brand name. So if a customer in the UAE will look at a product and there's no label on it, it doesn't say halal. It's not halal then. They don't understand what the government's thinking. It's not halal to them. So a lot of, when that policy was initially starting, I don't know what the situation is now, a lot of the exporters were saying we want to keep our own halal label the way we've had it in the past because we've invested a lot of money in marketing a particular label. So to make a long story shorter, the whole certification issue for certifiers is a little bit more complicated when the product is being exported, because there are a lot of other considerations they have to take into account.
I just want to add a few things, if I have time, to whatever Quentin was saying about, especially about stunning. When we started doing the policy in 1990s, we try to actually, the beginning of the idea was to have umbrella with requirement can cover all the halal under to be export or domestically cover all the Muslim in the wide world. That was the idea in the beginning. So we had some problems. So we came up with different country was asking for different things. And we have in our library, country by country, each country has their own requirement. It's Kuwait, Libya, Egypt, whatever, Saudi Arabia. So we said, okay, here is an idea. If we can get the biggest Muslim country, Malaysia, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and I select 5 of them, which is a leader of a Muslim country, and invited them to United States, which I did. And I said, with that, I will show them what we do in our industry and what we can do to meet their requirement as a Muslim, and that can goes to at least to 95% of the Muslim around the world. So one of the things was the stunning, for instance. And we said, okay, here it is. What exactly you are objecting the stunning? They said, because Muslim does not eat a dead animal. So if you stun the animal and it's dead, then you cannot slaughter and sell it as halal, no matter what you're gonna do after that. I said, okay, here we go. So we went to about 5, 6 different company. I'm sorry.
His banker is calling.
That's,
It's certifier.
so we go to different company, Conagra, and we went to Tyson's, and we went to different company to do this. And they stay on the line, and I said, okay, here it is. Stun the bird, which was for the poultry, and then after they stun the bird, you stay after the stunning, and you can take whatever number of bird and put it on the floor and see if it's still conscious or not. They did that, and they were extremely happy. Reason for that is we have it about, I'm not saying 99%, almost at that day, we have 100%. So stun that bird and they select whatever number they wanted, and 2 minutes or 3 minutes, here the bird is running. And we got those 5 countries agreed that stunning in United States, which we used 6 to 7 volts, not because of halal, but because of the safety. Completely different than Europe, which they're using 70 to 80 volt, which is stun to kill. So with that, they 6 to 7 passed by all those 5 major countries, and they agree with it, with the stunning, as long as other requirement met. So we have a problem with the meat. So we're stunning the animal, the cow. So what we do is we have a bullet and we shot the animal in the head and said, that's it. When you shot the animal, it will never gain conscious again. I said, okay, we have normally on our home in Egypt on a farm, if one cow, I remember that's why I took it and I put it in my policy, and a cow being hit by car, the whole farm are running. Why you want to slaughter before the animal is dead? It's not going to gain any conscious, but before their heart stopped. So the key here is the heart. They said yes. I said, okay, well, let us check the heart from the bullet, and it's not going to be getting conscious until the distance. We went to some plant, so the distance between when they stun until the guy will slaughter, it take about maybe a minute or minute and a half. And they check that, and the heart's still pumping. So actually, the animal is still alive. They said, okay. The only thing, the problem is they want to shorten the distance between when the animal been stunned and when the guy will slaughter the animal. And for the safety, United States said, no, we cannot do this because we have to have this in certain area, because by the time it's done and the time the guy will slaughter the animal, for safety purpose has to be at that time. So with that, we still negotiating with, I remember negotiating with those 5 countries about the distance, but they agree about the stunning. And then we got the 9/11, actually, I remember that, and then the whole thing. So for stunning, for the stunning, for both the bullets and the stunning electricity for the poultry, those 5 major countries agreed on it. Only thing left for that halal issue was the animal, when you slaughter it, you slaughter it upside down here in the United States. In Islam, which you have it from here, from left to right. So with that, we thought nahr, nahr, which we doing with a camel. And in a nahr, in a Muslim, is halal, it's from up to down. So what's the difference? And again, they agreed to it. And we have almost done this. The 9/11 stopped us from continuing that part.
Wow.
For a few years, or otherwise we have this umbrella and we have way different than we have now.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and that's very interesting. So the efforts are still continuing. I know there are some grassroots organizations that are also working on sort of standardizing the standards based on science, is what you're saying, looking at whether the heart's still beating, for example. So we have a few more minutes left. We do have a couple of questions. There's one from Amin Al-Hayat who says, he's asking for some resources about regulations and guidelines for livestock farming and slaughterhouses in Texas. That's very specific to a state, and Texas is one of the countries that, one of the states that does regulate the halal space. And I think that's the sort of thing that requires specialized legal research to look that up. But I can tell you that it is illegal in Texas to sell food as halal, which the seller knows is not halal, or which the seller did not adequately ensure was halal. So that brings in the raising of the livestock and also certification. So that would be something that would have to be researched on an individualized basis. And that's what American Halal Consultants are here to help with. Another question is, where does the life of the animal fall in the halal process? It seems more like the discussion is about how the animal is killed and not about how the animal is raised. Again, that would be an issue, I believe, more for certification and verification, which will be the topic of another webinar coming up in the future. I'm not sure which month we have that set for. So stay tuned, Amin, and hopefully we'll answer some of those questions too. Yeah, we still have a few minutes. Would either of you like to make some closing remarks? What should companies be thinking of for the future if they want to be in this space, get in this space, expand in this space? Anything we haven't addressed yet?
I have just maybe a minute or two, and then I will leave the rest for content.
Thank you.
By the way, state law and a federal law sometimes is not the same.
Yeah.
And here key, federal means all the states. Any federal law, that's me. But if you have a state law, the product if they have under requirement of the state, and there is a difference between the state law and a federal law, that product would be only for the state, cannot move around, cannot go from one state to another. That's one. The second thing is, I just want to make sure, if you really want to have this halal issue alive, which is very critical, and we took it when I wrote the policy, I took it from food safety, because it's a food safety, because you are deceiving the consumer, and this is safety for them. So with that, you have to demand halal product, especially with meat and poultry. You have to demand it, because I retired from USDA, and I could feel when I was planning to retire, just even before, I found that halal issue is starting getting under the rug. I could go before, and I could go to the Secretary of Agriculture. You have to keep pushing, or otherwise you go back. During this last 4 years with Trump, it pushed very hard under the rug. So we don't want to go backward. We want to go forward, because we already achieved, and this is a policy. They cannot cancel it, but they can not applying as much as what we like. Is not going to be advertised as we wanted to know, make people knows in the Middle East that we do, as a government of United States, have a halal policy, and we demand it. That is all what I have to say.
Thanks, Mustafa. Quinton?
I would say that I know one of the questions was about how the animal is raised, for example. I know that Saudi Arabia wanted to have a certification that an animal did not consume, like a cow, a cattle did not consume animal protein. And I would say the requirement, and then the USDA and Saudi Arabia, the government of Saudi Arabia, did come up with a protocol agreement that would certify that an animal didn't eat a certain animal protein for a certain period of time. But I never forget the discussion that I had with them. I would say, how in the world are you ever going to certify what an animal eats from birth to slaughter, unless you have a USDA person who's going to be out there in the field looking at them every day and every night? And I said, that's not going to happen. So to make a long story short, some of these certifications that are asked for by some countries are very difficult to meet, and it drives up the price of the product. So the whole domestic issue and what the animal, how the animal is raised and that sort of thing, sometimes it gets to be too burdensome for a system to sustain and be able to monitor. But I want to make one more comment about halal and kosher. Kosher is over time has become a $1 billion plus. I don't want to give the right exact number, but a lot of money in terms of halal kosher product that's being traded. Halal has the potential to be bigger, and it could be bigger because you have more people who are actually adhering to eating halal foods. So that's one of the reasons why it could be bigger. But right now, the industry is dispersed into, let's say, small manufacturers and small certifiers. And there is some consolidation that needs to take place in the industry that's going to make it viable in terms of making it bigger and better operated, and ways so that it can get a bigger market share. Because I think right now it's poised to do that, but it needs a certain amount of investment and consolidation to make it much more efficient.
Thank you for those words of wisdom, Quinton. Yeah, the notion of the separation of church and state here is what really underlies the comment that Mustafa made. Well, government doesn't deal in religion. Well, but it deals in business, and
Yeah.
in this case, both halal and kosher are big business items, and the halal market around the world is a multi-billion-dollar business, and so there are many opportunities there. And American Halal Consultants are here to help you as companies if you want to operate, enter the space, to tell you what you need to know and what to do. And I want to thank our founding member experts, Quentin Gray and Dr. Mustafa El Dakdoki, for being with us today and sharing your insights. I want to thank Marwan Ahmed, who is the president of American Halal Consultants and also the president of American Halal Council, which deals more along the research and advocacy side of things. We're dealing with a lot of business, but all of this goes hand in hand. As you can see that the research goes into the science goes into the standards goes into the regulation, and the regulation is what we all have to deal with in the business space, in all kinds of business. So I think we're just about right on time. And Marwana, if you would like to say any few words, we've got 3 minutes left.
I'm good. I want to thank both our speakers. Always great information and resources about the topics. Thank you.
Indeed. So for the folks watching on Facebook, stay tuned. We will have another monthly webinar coming up next month. Indeed, almost every next month of the year. And stay tuned also for an announcement of our annual Halal Expo and Summit, which will be coming up later in the year. And we look forward to having you back with us.
I guess that's it.
Yeah, I think that's it. I was just giving Marwan a chance to unlive us.
I did. Thank you.
All right.
Every time I listen to you guys,
you.
I learn something.
Oh,
you know,
so much.
And I learned something too.
Very informative. Appreciate it.
I learned.
We'll be in touch soon.
All right.
All
Okay.
right.
All right.
Thanks
Take
all.
care now.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.